right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the world's most exciting classroom. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. This is our 17th world's most exciting classroom, geared towards classrooms on the other side of the planet, so Australia, New Zealand, and surrounding areas. We need to catch up because we haven't had an event for a couple weeks, and the easiest way to do that is using our map. So give me 1 second here to get this map nice front and center. There we go. Don't forget, you can always interact with this map at any time at DARWIN200.com and see where we're coming and where we're going, and also go back in time and click on this camera option and see some really cool videos and pictures from what we've been up to. Although that's going to be a little harder to do for the next little while, and I'll tell you why. So after we left Cape Town, we made it to St. Helena. So tiny little island here. We can zoom in a little bit closer in the Atlantic Ocean. We spent just about a week here, but as we left Cape Town, our Starlink unit started to act up. So first it was our maritime unit, which we use mostly when we're at sea for connectivity. And that totally died on us. And then we switched and we started using our land unit. And then we lost that too. So I think 2 years of rough treatment on the ocean has just been too much for those Starlink units. And unfortunately, we pretty much lost them both at the same time. So what that means is that we won't be getting updates as nicely as we did for a little bit. So Ascension is where we're heading next. If you look here, we're about halfway to hitting Ascension. It's really special that we're able to visit Ascension because it's pretty much been closed off to tourists for quite some time. There's no real flights going in and out. Occasionally there's some flights from St. Helena. But essentially you can only visit Ascension right now with special research permits. And that took us a heck of a lot of time to get, but we were able to get those research permits. So we will be visiting Ascension and hopefully getting some cool video content. And then from there, we'll make our way up towards the Azores, and that's where we'll have 2 new Starlink units come on board the ship. So right here, and we'll be able to resume our regular connections. The ship isn't in any danger. They have radio communication. They also have a texting service that they can use to get out small email messages. But what it means is it's going to be a little bit before we get some really cool images back. And then it'll be a little bit before we're able to do a live broadcast from the ship. But that's okay. We've got lots of great content today. It's going to be a fun little event. I've got some content from St. Helena. We'll share a little bit later. Let me get back up onto the screen here. All right. Perfect. So we do have a great guest speaker joining us today. I'm going to bring him in just a moment. We've got Euan Ritchie joining us. He is a professor of wildlife ecology and conservation at Deakin University. So his research spans a range of fields, including behavioral, community, and evolutionary ecology. He looks at conservation biology, the landscape ecology, and wildlife management. And his focus is on Australia's native mammals. So I'm going to grab him from backstage right now. Here we go. Hey, Euan, how you doing?
I'm good, Joe. How are you?
Good, good. It's great to have you joining us, I believe, from Melbourne today.
Yep.
Very cool. We love doing these live connections. We love having live guests with us. And the ship was there back in November. We got to see some really cool mammals. We worked on some cool projects in the field, including one with platypus out in the New South Wales area. So that was pretty cool. And I think we had a really fun wallaby one as well, up kind of more northern New South Wales. We spent a little time with some koalas. So we got to see some good Aussie wildlife. Yeah. Excellent. Well, we've got a great group today. You'll be bombarded with questions in a little bit, but I know you have a little presentation to share with us today to kind of introduce us to some cool of what you get up to.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
All right. I see the screen share loading, looking promising.
Perfect.
Perfect.
See and hear me okay?
Looks good. Good to go.
Great. Thanks very much for having me today, Joe. And yeah, your adventures sound just truly amazing. So I want to talk quickly about Australia's mammals, which is something that I'm really passionate about and work on for my career. First of all, just want to acknowledge Australia's traditional custodians of country throughout this nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And as you said, Joe, I come from Melbourne. The Indigenous name for Melbourne is Naarm, and that's on Wurundjeri country of the Kulin Nation. So I'm not sure if you're able to see the chat or not, Joe, but I like to sort of sometimes start with a bit of a question for my audience. So if there's a way to get responses from people in real time, can anyone tell me what this animal here is?
All right. So we absolutely can see some stuff that comes in the chat. So as we see these pictures and you would ask the questions, feel free to put some of those into the chat for us. Let's see. There's a bit of a 10-second delay as well with YouTube. So we do have to give them a second. But I see narwhal coming in already.
Okay, so narwhal is indeed correct. So well done to whoever answered narwhal. The next one, pretty easy, I think.
Oh, I like these guys. I was with them in Costa Rica not too long ago. Oh, there we go. Troy says it's a sloth.
Yep, that's the three-toed sloth. Well done. Okay, this is an Australian one. Can anyone tell me what this is?
Oh, I like this one. I was just talking to a group called Colossal who are trying to do something kind of cool with this one. Let's see what comes in via the chat. Ah, there we go. Margaret says Tasmanian tiger.
Yeah, perfect. So that is the Tasmanian tiger, otherwise known as the thylacine. And last one, this is a very old drawing. Another Australian animal. This is a tricky one. So if anyone gets this one, I'll be very impressed.
All right. Oh, Isaac is guessing bilby.
Oh, very close. Very, very close.
Let's see if another guess or two comes in.
All right, I'll give you the answer. This one is the pig-footed bandicoot, which unfortunately is extinct. That's why it's a drawing, and that is actually in the same group as bilby. So well done to the person that guessed bilby, because it is very closely related. So my work really is looking at trying to conserve wildlife, both in Australia but also more broadly, and I'm really passionate about that, and particularly Australia's mammals. I don't know how many people would know this, but unfortunately, in the last couple of 100 years, about 40 species of Australian mammal have been driven to extinction, which is more than anywhere else in the world. So I really love this photo. And this is a quote from my son. At the time was age 5. He's now 17, so he's much taller. This is my son, Rowan, here, and my daughter, Kiri. And we're looking at eclectus parrots in far north Queensland. And it's really, I guess, encapsulates what really drives me is that wildlife is loved by so many people and it brings people together. And that's really what I'm trying to dedicate my career towards, is trying to conserve wildlife. I want to just really quickly celebrate Australia's mammals. We mentioned a couple of them at the start. These are, of course, echidnas, one of only 2 egg-laying mammals in the world, the other one being the platypus. So these are, of course, monotremes. There's the wonderful platypus that we mentioned before. And I'm going to quickly whip through just some of the, I guess, well-known ones, but lesser-known ones. So koalas. We have many species of bats in Australia. So although we often think about marsupials in Australia, so that is mammals with pouches, a lot of our mammals in Australia are actually also bats. And just here's a few examples of those wonderful bats that we have. Marine mammals, of course, and you might have been lucky enough to see some marine mammals on your journey in the ship. This, of course, is a dugong, but we also have many other species, including, of course, dolphins, several species of dolphins, whales, and, of course, seals and sea lions. Wombats. Who doesn't love wombats, including, of course, the backwards facing pouch. So here's a mother with her young in the pouch. So they're both having a bit of lunch at the same time. Wonderful animals. There's 3 species of wombat in Australia: the northern hairy-nosed wombat, the southern hairy-nosed wombat, and the common wombat, or otherwise known as the bare-nosed wombat. We have so many species of possums. This is a feather-tail possum that could fit in the palm of your hand, ranging up to much larger species like the brush-tail possum, which you might have even seen in cities if you are around Sydney and Melbourne and those places. Cuscus in far north Queensland, and we have gliding possums too that can basically, in some cases, glide more than 100 meters through the air between trees by using a membrane that's attached to the side of their body that they spread out and glide with. So there's gliding squirrels in some parts of the world. and we have gliding possums in Australia. This is the smallest possum that we have that's entirely dependent on nectar. This is the honey possum and the striped possum from North Queensland. The numbat. These are insectivorous and carnivorous marsupials, which the scientific name is dasyurids, including really small species like the long-tailed planigale, is only about 6 grams as an adult. I'm not sure if you were lucky enough to eat Tim Tam biscuits, I know, which are very popular with people, chocolate biscuits. One of those biscuits weighs 18 grams. So this is a third of a Tim Tam biscuit, this little amazing animal, the long-tailed planigale. Bilbies and bandicoots, I should say, and many Australian native rodents as well. So we often, sometimes I think about, mice and rats in a fairly unfavourable way. They get into our houses and they might cause problems, but we actually have a lot of beautiful, wonderful native Australian rodents in Australia. This is the black-footed tree rat. This is a hopping mouse. This is a heath mouse. So really, really wonderful Australian native rodents as well. And of course, my favourite group really is the macropods, which includes wallabies, kangaroos, tree kangaroos. This is a Lumholtz tree kangaroo from far north Queensland, a musky rat kangaroo, a rufous bettong. And these are just some of the extraordinary types of, wallabies and kangaroos that we have in Australia. So we're really, really lucky to have such a diverse array of fauna. And this is actually the species that I studied for my PhD research, the Antilopine wallaroo, which is found in northern Australia, and the males are sort of beautiful red colour, and the females are smaller in body size and grey, and that's a young one that's dependent on the female there as well. So why do we care about our Australian mammals so much? Aside from them just being wonderful, and of course we should be conserving all species, they have really important roles in the environment. So as an example, this is the eastern barred bandicoot, much smaller than a house cat. We estimate from our research that these little animals can dig up the equivalent of 1 elephant's worth of soil every year. And by all that digging, that actually helps to increase the amount of water that goes into the soil, seeds that get trapped in the soil, which helps plants to grow more easily. So it really contributes to a much healthier ecosystem. We've also worked out that other species of bandicoots are quite adaptable to urban environments. So this is the southern brown bandicoot that can be found just in and around southeast Melbourne. This one's helping itself to a bit of dog food in someone's backyard. And we've been studying really how we can accommodate these animals better in really modified areas. So like really suburban areas here. And here's a little bandicoot living right on the side of the highway. So obviously in a bit of a perilous situation. And we've been undertaking conservation research to understand how we can basically better protect these wonderful wildlife, including in our cities, because our cities do actually have a lot of really amazing wildlife. Another species of mammal that I'm really fond of, this is the spotted-tailed quoll. And we did research looking at what they eat. And one of the ways that you look at what animals eat is actually by looking at their poo. And I know that might sound icky to some people, but as scientists, we can learn a lot by doing that. And we actually worked out that these quolls eat a lot of rabbits. And in Australia, rabbits are not native and they cause a lot of environmental problems. And so we think that by actually trying to maintain more quolls, if we can, into areas, that might actually help us to address issues that we have with rabbits, which are a really big problem for the Australian environment and particularly plant species. I've also been really lucky to work outside of Australia. So this is in Papua New Guinea. I worked with friends of mine who run a conservation organisation called the Tenkili Conservation Alliance, and that took me to this really remote part of Papua New Guinea. You can see right up here in the top part of Papua New Guinea there, working with local communities where we put out camera traps to look for really important wildlife. So here's us setting up camera traps. Here's me wearing my hat. And we're setting out camera traps. We put out peanut butter and honey and oats in these kind of balls, and we put them out in front of these cameras. There's a camera strapped to a tree here. As the animals walk past, that collects images, and we can tell what wildlife are in those areas. And we managed to record critically endangered species. So this is the Waimang or golden mantle tree kangaroo hopping off. There's only a few hundred of these left in the world. There's several thousand giant pandas left in the wild, just to put it in perspective. So, we know that pandas, of course, are in trouble. These animals are even rarer. So it's really, really important that we can collect information and, again, also hopefully contribute to their conservation. This is another really rare species. Here's a bit of camera image stitched together. This is called the Tenkili tree kangaroo or Scots tree kangaroo. And prior to our work, this animal had never been recorded using cameras before. So pretty exciting research that I was a part of. Another area of research that I really focus on a lot is dingoes. A dingo is Australia's largest top predator on land, aside from, of course, us people. And it has a really important role, a little bit similar to what you might be familiar with in such places like the US with wolves, large cats in parts of Africa and other parts of the world. Large carnivores, large predators are really, really important for helping to maintain healthy and balanced ecosystems. So in Australia, as an example, they help to keep feral cat and foxes, which are introduced predators, keep their numbers lower. That helps other animals that are eaten by cats and foxes. They also eat kangaroos and feral goats, and that keeps those herbivore numbers down much lower than they would be, which means that the plants don't get overgrazed by those herbivores. So these dingoes have a really, really important role in the landscape. And here's just another example of a camera trap series of, so we put this smelly kind of canister here that contains tuna oil and anchovies. So it's really, really stinky. And the dingoes love to come in and smell that, and they come in front of the camera. And by doing that, we get these wonderful images of these dingoes coming in. We can then count how many dingoes there are in the area and really try and understand them better. Feral cats as well. So here's a feral cat being trapped on a camera trap. And this is a wonderful little hopping mouse. Really, really long tail you see there. Beautiful native Australian rodent. Very, very fast. And I just like to finish up and saying that although a lot of my work is focused on research, I also do focus quite a bit of attention to trying to communicate the importance of science and really raise the profile of Australian wildlife. And so with Cosmos magazine, I started the competition called Australian Mammal of the Year. If you'd like to learn more about Australian mammals, you can visit that website, and there's lots of articles written about Australian mammals, many of which you might not have heard about. And the other thing that I do is work with artists and authors. And so I contributed to this book called Jumping Joeys by this author called Sarah Allen. And it's a really, really wonderful children's book that will tell you all about Australian mammals, but in a really accurate scientific way, but in an accessible way with really, really beautiful artwork, as you can see. So that's me. So that's my presentation. And I'm really, really happy to take any questions.
All right, perfect. I'm going to come back from backstage. Yeah, what a cool country. I love visiting Australia. I lived in Wollongong outside Sydney for a year. It was great to be back with the DARWIN200, and monotremes are just my favorite. I think the monotremes are just so cool, and echidnas are a bit easier to find in the wild, but when you find a platypus, it's awesome, really special.
They are wonderful animals.
And I'm so jealous of the tree kangaroos. I would love to see a tree kangaroo in the wild. That's so cool.
Next time you're back, I'll tell you where to go.
Perfect. Love it. All right. Well, I've got some questions starting to come in already. The first one here is from Jasmine. And Jasmine wants to know about the dingoes. So how big do the dingoes get?
Yeah, I just saw her question in the chat. So it really depends on which part of Australia you're in. So if you're in the sort of drier desert areas, they tend to be a bit smaller, around about 15 kilograms. If you're in the sort of alpine areas where it's obviously a lot colder, dingoes can be around about 20 kilos or more. So it just kind of depends on where you are. But on average, they're much smaller than, say, wolves. So similar in size. For people that don't know coyotes, kind of a similar size to a coyote. But yeah, their size is a little bit variable.
Yeah, I visited Fraser Island and got to see that population that's just kind of, it hasn't kind of had that mixing with domestic dogs, and it's just that beautiful color.
They are
pretty special.
Wonderful animals. Yeah, I can see a question there from Freddie, which says, "What's the scariest animal?" That's a really great question. I personally am not really scared of any animals. What I would say though is that I'm cautious around some animals and I respect them. So, Australia obviously is renowned for having lots of dangerous animals and deadly animals, like, of course, funnel web spiders and venomous snakes, of course, crocodiles and sharks. But really, there's no need to be scared of any of these animals as long as we respect them. So if we, use the environment in a responsible way, obviously you don't go swimming in areas where there's crocodiles. don't put your hands into areas where you can't see, or, you know, if you're going to go for a walk in the bush, make sure you wear protective clothing. There's really no animals to be scared of in the Australian landscape. And actually, Australia is probably one of the safest places in the world because, you know, you can go camping, you can sleep out under the stars in Australia and not worry about a large carnivore that might come along. You can't do that in parts of Africa. So really, Australia is a pretty safe place overall.
Yeah. So Eddie is curious if all those pictures, we saw so many different mammals. Eddie's wondering if you've seen them all in the wild.
I wish I'd seen all of them. I've seen a lot of them, but some of those images obviously are taken by some of my friends and colleagues who have worked in different parts of Australia. So I've seen a lot of Australia, and I'm really lucky. And that's, I guess, one of the wonderful things about being a scientist and a ecologist is that I get to go to really amazing places and see amazing wildlife. So no, look, I still have a lot of animals that I would love to see. One of the animals that I really would just absolutely love to see one day is called the marsupial mole. And it is a mole, but a marsupial version, so with a pouch. And they live underground almost all the time. So it's really hard to see them. Occasionally they come up to the surface, but they're these beautiful sort of golden looking animals, golden fur, and they could fit in the palm of your hand. And so I do know some friends that have seen them, but I'm yet to see one.
All right. We've got curious students about sizes and rarity. So Sasha wants to know the smallest mammal, and then Troy's curious, what do you think the rarest might be?
Yeah, so the smallest mammal, I think the long-tailed planigale is right up there in Australia. So as I said, they're about 6 grams or 6 to 8 grams, I think it is, as an adult. So that's really tiny. That's you know, smaller than many biscuits that you would, you know, have with a drink. You know, they're tiny little animals. Some of the bats are also very small in size. In terms of the rarest animal, one of the rarest animals that we have in Australia is called Gilbert's potteroo. And there's just over about 100 or so of those left in the wild. So that's incredibly rare. And of course, there's a whole range of other species too that are relatively uncommon. But yeah, Gilbert's potteroo is definitely one that's super rare.
All right. I'm going to dip over to YouTube for a couple questions here. We saw that you use camera traps. So this question is, do you ever put trackers, GPS collars on mammals?
Look, I haven't done that for a while. We do typically use cameras largely, and that means that we don't have to interfere with the animals very much at all. So, you know, they can go about using the environment, and, you know, capturing and handling animals is an important part of research, but it can cause the animal stress. So we only really do that if we absolutely have to. So look, we have tracked animals in the past, including bandicoots, to see where they go. And I talked about trying to sort of make cities more wildlife friendly. Mm-hmm. And by tracking bandicoots in those areas, we worked out exactly how much area they need and what sort of habitat they need. So there are times when we need tracking devices, but a lot of the time we try to avoid doing that if we can.
All right. Working in the field, what's the most challenging aspect of being in the field?
Gosh, in Australia, it can be many things because often you can have, you know, floods and fires. And so, you know, you might be in the middle of a quite remote part of Australia, and all of a sudden you have a huge rainfall event and you have to get out of there. Otherwise, you're going to be flooded in there with your vehicle. Or, of course, fires are a really big problem as well. So I guess that's one of the challenges of working in the Australian environment. But I think, you know, when you've been working in the field for a long time, like myself and many others have, as long as you take all the right safety precautions and you have the right technology, I imagine very similar to being on the ship. As long as you do all the right things, there's really not too much to worry about.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you, I don't remember if you touched on the hopping mouse. I know a student guessed hopping mouse earlier, but Margot is wondering how big they get, the hopping mouse.
Yeah, not very big either. So, you know, the body, again, would fit into the palm of your hand. Their tail is longer. So the tail might be sort of, I'm guessing, maybe 25 centimeters or so long. So they're quite big for an Australian rodent. Although, having said that, we have 2 native Australian rodents that get close to 1 kilogram in weight, which is a pretty big rat. So we have the Australian water rat, or Rakali is the indigenous name. And in North Queensland, we have the giant white-tailed rat, which is even bigger, and it lives in the rainforest of North Queensland. So hopping mice are certainly not the biggest, but in terms of the mice that we have, the native mice we have, it's definitely the biggest mouse species that we have in Australia. So yeah, really, really wonderful animals, and it's really cool to watch them hopping. So if anyone's been lucky enough to see kangaroo rats in North America, they're quite similar to kangaroo rats in the way that they move around in the environment.
All right. Okay, so a couple more questions here before we let you go. You mentioned bats. So this one's on YouTube, wondering how bat populations are doing in Australia.
Yeah, look, fortunately, bat populations are doing reasonably well. Although one of the issues that we face, and I guess this is an issue for all wildlife around the world, is climate change. And unfortunately, the large species in particular, the fruit bats, are really susceptible to really hot days. So if you have several days that are sort of 35 degrees Celsius or above in a row, unfortunately, some of those bats actually don't do very well at all, and they can suffer quite large population crashes. And we've seen that with the spectacled flying fox in North Queensland, and also some other species in southern Australia. So compared to many other species, the bats are doing relatively well overall, but climate change is a really big risk, as well as, of course, habitat destruction. So, if we have to cut down trees, whether that's for agriculture or for housing, many of those bats, require those hollows and bark and so forth that they live under. So we need to make sure that we conserve their habitat as well.
All right. Isaac is curious about your favorite Aussie animal, and Ruva wants to know if you were to guess how many species of animals you've seen, what would your guess be?
Yeah, so the answer to the first question about what's my favorite, that's such a great question, and I always find it really hard. But I think definitely one of my favorites would be the thorny devil. And that's actually a reptile. And if anyone's seen a picture of it, it's kind of this lizard that's got spines all over it. And they eat ants. And one of the coolest things about them, though, is that they can actually drink by standing in a puddle. And so they live in deserts, and there's obviously not very much water or rain around. And what they do when it rains is they just kind of walk along and they stand in the puddle. And because their scales are so fine, the water gets sucked up their skin via capillary action. So it basically gets sucked up from the ground all the way to the side of their mouth, and they drink like that, which is just, I think, really, really cool.
Very cool.
In terms of how many species I've seen, I couldn't give you an exact number, but it would be in the thousands. So I've been really, really lucky to see large numbers of birds and fish on the Great Barrier Reef, frogs, mammals, reptiles, and lots of invertebrates. Australia has really diverse invertebrates as well. So look, it would be in the many thousands, but what that exact number is, I honestly couldn't tell you.
Yeah. There is nothing better than being out in nature, out in the field with your camera, or without. You don't always have to have your camera, but there's nothing better than seeing things in the wild.
I completely agree. You must have seen some amazing wildlife on your trip, and including on the ocean, I suspect. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last question for you, Euan. It's always, classrooms are curious about inspiration. So what do you think led you to a career in biology, conservation?
I think two things. I think my family was really supportive of I think I had a natural passion for animals, but, as you said about spending time outside. So, as a child, I spent a lot of time fishing, snorkeling, camping with my family. And I think I just sort of naturally fell in love with the natural environment and wildlife, and thought, if there's a career for me in this, that's what I want. And luckily enough, I managed to pursue that. So I think, the lesson in that is find out what your passion is in life and pursue that, and you'll be really happy.
Absolutely. Well, Euan, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for taking us into the world of mammals. You've got a great job. Your office, I know you're not outside all the time. There is indoor work too, and sitting at your computer and papers and such, but your outdoor office is pretty cool too.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Thanks so much, Euan.
See ya.
All right. All right, boys and girls. Very cool. It's always great to have a great guest with us. And it was really cool, Euan introducing us to some amazing Australian wildlife. And I really like the camera trap footage he showed us of the tree kangaroos. Some of those, like those ones in Papua New Guinea, are so rare. And him out there with that team, they were the first ones to capture that one species on camera. That's pretty special. That's pretty unique. So we have a few things to do today before we say goodbye. I've got some really cool St. Helena videos to show you. But before I do that, I want to give you a brand new experiment. So we're not going to have the answer to the solar system experiment this week because we didn't have a session last week. So I'm going to give classrooms one more week to try that solar system experiment, taking things to represent the planets, going out to your schoolyard, maybe a local park, and doing your best to take a guess at how you would set that solar system up to scale. But I think you're really going to like the result of the video that Stu made. It's a really cool video. We'll share that next week. But I do have a brand new experiment that you can try at class in the classroom or at home. This class experiment does have the use of an open flame, so fire. So it's one that you definitely need to do with supervision, whether it's with your teacher in the classroom or maybe you try it at home with your parents. But let's take a look at this experiment here together. This is one that I did in my office quite a while ago for our other World's Most Exciting Classroom events, but I think it's a pretty cool one. So I'm going to share this video now. It should just take a second to load. And here we go. The experiment live here today. So let's clear that out of the way. There we go. Let's switch to my second camera. We're happy with that too. And let's get our materials that we need for today's experiment. So pretty easy experiment today, not a lot of materials. You need a jar. So you could use something like this mason jar, which I have used. You might have some science equipment. You might have a beaker or something that you can use in your classroom, but I just used a mason jar. And then I filled a little layer of the bottom with baking soda. So I'll just show that up there. So I've got that filled up with baking soda. You can see that there. Not a whole lot, just a little layer on the bottom. Then you're going to need a little bit of vinegar. So this is just white vinegar. I have it here in this little glass container. So I'm going to set that here. And then this is where you're going to need some help. If you do this in the classroom, you'll definitely want your teacher to do it, maybe at the front of the classroom to demonstrate. Or if you're doing it at home, you'll want some help from mom and dad because we need 4 of these little candles. You might use bigger candles. You might have something in the classroom or at home that you can use. But I have these little tea lights here, so they're not very big. But that's what I'm going to use for today. I am going to use this handy dandy barbecue lighter. And I'm going to light these 4 candles. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what I'm going to do today is I'm going to extinguish these candles. I'm not going to touch them. I'm not going to put anything on them. I'm not going to blow on them. But in a moment, like magic, these 4 candles are going to be extinguished. So to do that, I'm going to take my mason jar. And I'm going to pour the vinegar in. Now watch what happens when I pour the vinegar in. We get a nice reaction happening there, fizzing up. Now I'm going to take it and I'm just going to not pour it, but I'm just going to run it over the candles. Nothing's coming out from it. I'm not pouring anything. But look at that. All 4 candles have extinguished themselves. I didn't blow on them. I didn't touch them. But something happened there, some kind of reaction. So that is your experiment over the next 2 weeks to try this in the classroom with your teacher, or maybe try it at home with mom and dad. You can see the supplies here. We don't need a whole lot of supplies to be able to do this experiment. So I want to see your photos if you try this at home in the classroom. Send them to classroom at DARWIN200.com and we'll have some prizes for some classrooms that do send in some photos. So classroom at DARWIN200.com, give this experiment a try. And if you want, you can add a little note what you think happened. And in 2 weeks from now, we will explain the results and we will share just what happened in this experiment. Okay, so kind of a fun experiment there. Maybe a little bit of a mystery as to what happened. Again, we had those 4 candles. Nothing was poured on them. I didn't blow on them, but I passed the jar over top of them and all 4 of them went out in a row, one at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4. So give that a try if you can. Maybe in your classroom, maybe you'll try it at home with your parents. Don't do it on your own because it does use an open flame. And yeah, it could be knocked over. You just don't want to play around with fire. So it's good to have some supervision. Send in some pictures to classroom@darwin200.com. 2 weeks to give that a go. And then we will have our results and we'll talk about why it happened that way. And then you have till next week to try and make that solar system in your schoolyard or maybe a park or something and have your best guess at how far apart you should put the planets from each other and from the sun. I think you'll be really surprised when you see the results video. So St. Helena, really cool place in the Pacific. It has been a stop for hundreds of years, an important resupply stop for ships. Not as important today as it used to be hundreds of years ago. Now it's more of a tourist spot to come and visit. There's great wildlife there, so a lot of biodiversity, although many species that were unique to the island have gone extinct due to activities of humans, which is really unfortunate. And then St. Helena is also kind of famous for, well, basically its most famous prisoner. So Napoleon was placed there after he was captured for the second time by the English. They put him on the island to live out his life. He had a house to live in, but there was no way for him to leave the island. He was pretty much trapped there, and that's where he lived out the rest of his life before he passed away. So a very famous prisoner spent his remaining time on St. Helena. And then there's another very famous individual who's currently living on St. Helena. And that's what this video is going to focus on. So I'm not going to tell you any more about it. You're going to see it in this video. So here we go. Coming your way now. Should be loading and you will see our video.
Welcome everyone to the beautiful island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. My name's Stuart McPherson. I'm the founder and project leader of DARWIN200, and it's an absolute pleasure to bring you to this beautiful island. Look, I'll do a quick 360. The main town of the island is up through that fortification there, through that gate. For 500 years, ships have been using this beautiful island as a victualling station to resupply, to get fresh water, to get fresh food, and to get fresh supplies. And we are incredibly lucky. The DARWIN200 ship, Oosterschelde, is right out there. Can you see it just over there? That's our ship. Obviously, we're nearly 2 years into our global voyage, and it's just a pleasure and an honor to be coming to this very, very special island. Well, for those of you that don't know, St. Helena is a very important place. It has literally hundreds and hundreds of unique species of animals and plants. In fact, it's sometimes even called the equivalent of the Galapagos in the Atlantic. From memory, I think it's 600 endemic invertebrates, bugs alone, and dozens of unique plants. And there were originally many unique birds, one of which survives, the lyrebird. So it's a very important island for its wildlife and ecology. But there's also 4 very special giant tortoises. The oldest giant tortoise in St. Helena is Jonathan. He arrived on the island in 1882, but he arrived as a sub-adult, so it's actually thought that he was born around 1832. So that would make him about 193 years old. The truth is, his exact age isn't really known because no one was there when he hatched, but the fact that he was nearly an adult in 1888, would indicate that birthday around 1832. And this makes him the oldest land animal on Earth today, at least as far as we know. So this amazing animal is 193 years old. He lives at Plantation House, which is the home of the governor of the island, this beautiful white house. And Jonathan spends most of his time munching grass. He loves eating grass on the lawn. He's a little bit like a natural lawnmower. He keeps the grass nice and short. He has a very peaceful life, but just stop and think for a moment. He's lived for nearly 2 centuries. He was alive not just in World War II, not just in World War I. He was alive through most of Queen Victoria's life. He was even alive when Charles Darwin visited St. Helena in 1836. Okay, he wasn't on the island at that time, but Jonathan was actually alive. He's a contemporary of Charles Darwin. Remember, he was born in 1832, and Darwin came to St. Helena in 1836. So their lives really overlap, and in fact, Jonathan was alive for most of Charles Darwin's life. Well, Jonathan isn't the only giant tortoise here on beautiful St. Helena. There's actually 3 other tortoises. Emma, who's 56, David, who's also 56, and Frederick, who's 53. So these guys are quite young. These 3 tortoises are actually quite young by tortoise standards. Frederick has a bit of an interesting story. He was originally brought to St. Helena hoping that he might be a mate for Jonathan or one of the other tortoises, and he was thought to be a girl called Frederica. But when he actually arrived on St. Helena, it turned out that he was a boy. So he became Frederick instead of Frederica. David's a really lovely tortoise. He loves to wallow in the mud, because remember, these giant tortoises are cold-blooded. So they heat up in the sun during the day, and they like to cool off in mud to regulate their temperature. Much has changed in the last 2 centuries since Charles Darwin visited beautiful St. Helena. Unfortunately, a lot of the forests have been cut down and also destroyed by invasive species like goats. But the conservationists here on the island are doing an absolutely incredible job replanting trees. There's a very important project called the Millennium Forest, in which thousands of trees are being planted to rebuild that ancient ecosystem that Charles Darwin saw, to conserve this beautiful treasure trove of unique animals and plants that occur nowhere else on Earth. Well, I really hope you enjoyed seeing the tortoises. They're very special animals, aren't they? They're so beautiful. We'll go back to Joe now for the next part of the world's most exciting classroom.
All right, so there we go. That is one of the last videos we were able to get from the Oosterschelde and the DARWIN200 before we lost the second Starlink unit. So it will be a little bit quiet. Maybe we'll be able to sneak out a little bit of video action, because some people have to go from the Ascension back to St. Helena. So we should be able to send a little bit of video back that way. But until we get to the Azores and get 2 new Starlink units on board, it's going to be a little bit tougher to get that fresh video out. However, that was pretty cool. Jonathan, we got to meet Jonathan, the world's oldest known living land animal. So they figure Jonathan is 193 years old. I want to share a cool picture here. If you'll just give me a second. Share screen window. There we go. So this picture here is from 1888. So in 1888, this is a picture of Jonathan right down here. And biologists can look at that and see that he's a mature tortoise in this picture, which means he must be at least 50 years old in this picture in 1888, which means his birthday must be sometime in the 1830s. So that's how they get that estimate that Jonathan is probably around 193 years old. That's pretty incredible. We have no idea how long he's going to live for. He's very well taken care of. He gets lots of food, baths, and cleaning of his shell. So who knows? We're going to kind of find out in real time how long a giant tortoise, a Seychelles giant tortoise like Jonathan, can live for. We know it's at least around 190, 193 years old. So pretty cool. There's one other little video clip I want to share with you from St. Helena, and this is kind of a cool attraction or maybe a cool challenge for people. So let's see if I can find that video on my desktop. Where is it hiding? Ah, here it is. So there we go. That should be playing now. I'm going to turn the volume down a little bit so I can talk over it. But this is called Jacob's Ladder. Jacob's Ladder is this really steep, really long staircase that connects Jamestown down in the valley to the fort up top, on the top of, I guess, this little mountain. So this is a very steep staircase. It's about 700 steps. As you can see, it's very steep. It's a climb. If it was straight up and down, I think somewhere between 100 to 200 meters. And it is not an easy climb to do. I think the record for the fastest climb is between 4 and 5 minutes. And so every year they kind of have this challenge where people can take this challenge to try and get up as fast as they can to get up to the fort. As you can see, by the time you're getting to the top, there's not a lot of energy left. So somewhere between 4 and 5 minutes is the record for making this climb. In the 1800s, they didn't have this staircase. It used to be a rope ladder. Would you imagine climbing up a rope ladder instead to get all the way to the top to this fort? So I tried to convince Stuart, our education or our expedition leader, to challenge himself and see if he could beat the record. I don't know if he did. I have a feeling he didn't, because that would be a pretty exhausting thing to do. I think he'd be pretty wiped out for the rest of the day. There we go. That's Jacob's Ladder. Goes from Jamestown down in the valley and then to the fort up top. And it is not an easy challenge. Okay, so yeah, I think we're going to leave it there for today. We have a curiosity of the week from our last World's Most Exciting Classroom to look at, and then I will leave you with a brand new curiosity before we sign off for today. So let me load up our new curiosity. Remember, with the curiosities, you have 1 week to try them, but let's take a look at the answer to our most recent one.
Welcome back, everyone. Last week, I asked you to try and identify these 4 little objects. Each one had a different shape, colour and texture. They're very different from one another. Could you work out what they are? This is a very difficult curiosity to identify. These are known as desert tears. They're a type of mineral made out of silica, and they occur when volcanic ash or lava cools and hydrates. As they form, they develop their own shape and colour. Some of them are black, like this one here. Others are white. Some can be grey, and some can be brown. They're all semi-translucent. You can just about see light shining through them. And they're regarded as a semi-precious gemstone. Did you identify these correctly as desert tears? Let's find out who won this week's prize. Thank you for watching and for taking part.
All right, so we had lots of good guesses. Nobody was able to get this correct answer in our World's Most Exciting Classroom for North American classrooms. So North America, South America, UK. We had some good guesses here as well, but we had nobody guessing desert tears. So again, lots of good guesses. Some classes clearly did some good research, but like Stu said, this was a really tricky one, and nobody sent in that answer of desert tears. So a huge shout out to the classrooms who gave it a go. But as happens occasionally with our curiosity of the week, sometimes you just have to wait for the next one. So really good guesses, but unfortunately, desert tears was not given by any classrooms in our North American or in this side of the world, World's Most Exciting Classroom. But we got another chance right now with a brand new curiosity. So let's take a look at this newest video. Excuse me. And then we'll say goodbye for this week. Here we go.
Welcome back, everyone. For this week's curiosity, I have these 2 pointy objects here. What do you think these might be? If you look, they're very sharp. They have barbs on one side of them, and they have a knife-like blade on both edges. They are not teeth. What do you think these might be? Send in your best guess to classroom@darwin200.com for a chance to win an Amazon gift voucher prize. Join me next week to find out the identity of these strange, sharp little objects. Good luck, and thank you for taking part.
There we go. There is our new curiosity of the week. You can always come back to this video on the Darwin 200 channel. World's Most Exciting Classroom number 17. You can take a look at it again if you want to, do a little bit of research. You have 1 week to send in your best guess to classroom at DARWIN200.com, classroom at DARWIN200.com. You have 1 more week for the solar system experiment and 2 weeks for our brand new experiment, extinguishing candles. A huge shout out to Euan for joining us today. Thank you to our classrooms who tune in live and those who will tune into the recording. And we look forward to seeing you in 1 week when we'll have another exciting event for you. So thanks, everyone. Have a great week, and we are going to sign off for today. See ya.